want to welcome everybody to our conversation today. Really excited to be hosting, and we've got Corey Pitzer, who's going to give us a little overview of what we're going to be talking about today, and then we'll jump into some introductions and then right into some questions. So, Corey, let everybody know what we're up to here today.
Okay, Scott and Yurishni and Gary, thank you for joining me today. There is currently, and maybe for the last 5-10 years, a lot of debate in the safety field going on about what approach is the right approach. And the two big approaches is typically known as safety 1 and safety 2, or traditional safety or safety differently. One of the contention points is that from the safety 2 people is that behavior-based safety and safety 1 introduce fear into the organization by getting people to comply to rules, but not, that's fine. But if they make a mistake, there is a lot of retribution going on in terms of investigation processes, in terms of reaction from management, people making mistakes, and finger pointing happening. And this is a really huge issue in organizations. And what we're doing is having a look at the principles that had been listed, the 14 principles that have been listed by Edward Deming in 1982. So this is old stuff. But when you look at it, it is actually in many ways defining what this new thinking in safety is all about. So the new thinking in safety is not all that new. It is really embodied in those principles. And the first one we're going to look at today is the principle number 8, I think it is, drive out fear. And so we're going to look at that in terms of safety, how that affects and is being affected in terms of the way we manage safety in an organization. So that's the context of our discussion today.
Great. So let's start with some introductions, and we'll go around the table and introduce yourself, and then describe your role within your organization as well. So, Yurishni, did you want to kick things off?
Sure. Thank you so much for that. And Corey, really interesting listening to you in terms of safety model, safety framework. And for us, it's really about bringing everything into the context and making sure that we co-create and take people along the journey. In terms of me, Yurishni Govender, I have a PhD in business leadership, so very familiar with business models. I'm currently doing my postdoctoral with Wits School of Mining. Corey is very familiar with the area that we're looking at, and that's really to look at pioneering brilliant safety in the mining industry. Because as we know, there isn't a safety system that is functional, that is embedded into mining. I am a wife, I am a mom, I have 2 beautiful children, and my daughter's married, so I have another son, 2 engineers in the house, my daughter's a pharmacist, very, very strong family values. And I think because of that, I've absolutely embraced safety into my home. I've been in sustainability for more than 30 years. And for me, it's really looking out for that new way of doing things that will make the future much brighter for my children. So for me, that's very important to create this legacy of positive and well-being for the generations to come. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, Scott, thanks from our side, and I think also just to start off, many thanks to yourself and Corey for the opportunity to be able to take part and to contribute on the webinar. Yeah, I think safety for me, it's and the last couple of years, it's really been an eye-opener. It's been an interesting journey. It's been a fascinating journey, and in a sense, I've had my own microcosm of the safety maturity journey. I think working with the likes of Corey has made it an absolutely fantastic, intriguing, interesting, and also challenging journey. My background as such is I'm actually qualified as a naval architect, and it's a bit strange, a naval architect working in the mining industry, and I think especially in a non-technical type field like safety. But I think that just also goes to show that anybody and everybody can and is a safety leader. I've worked with De Beers for close on 23 years now in a whole variety of roles. I am based in Cape Town in South Africa, and have a wife and 3 kids as well. So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, Gary. Super
Thanks.
glad to have you here today. And Corey, do you want to give everybody a quick background on who Corey Pitzer is?
Yes, also I'm a husband, a father, a grandfather of 2 beautiful boys with my daughter, living in Vancouver, grew up in South Africa, worked for many years in Australia, and then moved to Canada, Vancouver about 14 years ago. And a lovely place to live in. And from here, SAFEmap has grown into an organization that has got an international footprint. And we have a very unique moniker. Safety is not our business, it is our passion. And I think that's true of everyone in our organization and every one of our clients, the likes of Gary and Yurishni. It's all share this common passion for safety, for taking care of people, and do what we can do to improve the lots of people in the workplace.
Yeah, great. And I'm Scott Cuthbert, CEO, co-founder of SAFEpedia, and I love that moniker. And I think that's why we're strategic partners with SAFEmap, is because safety is our passion, and the other passion is, ever since Corey migrated to Canada, is to try to explain and get him to understand the rules of hockey. So between safety and hockey, that's how we spend most of our time with Corey and the folks at SAFEmap. So great. Well, let's dive into the questions, and we'll get Corey to kick off. What do you think fear means in a company?
Yeah, so as I said, one of the fundamental principles of Deming was drive out fear, and the way that fear is driven into the organization is the way that we respond to events in a workplace, and there's no escaping that. We are faced with serious accidents, serious injuries, fatal events, catastrophic events. And who wants that? So it is by nature inducing fear into the organization. But then what does that fear look like? The fear really is to report openly about a person's own mistakes. When they do something wrong, everybody naturally wants to hide it. You don't want to be the focus of people in your team, in your organization. The fear to disagree with people on matters. It's easier to just agree and go along with what is the general topic or the view of people. To speak out, to challenge, to question people around you, especially your boss, or even to share personal issues in a public environment. It is really a difficult situation for most employees, especially frontline employees, where most of the action is. And so the challenge is, how do we drive fear out there? But there's another angle on fear, and it is not fear for retribution anymore. People don't fear to make a mistake and they're going to be persecuted by HR or by the safety department. There's a lot of systems in the workplaces now that protect people from that. Good management and HR systems. So to me, the biggest fear and an embodiment of fear is the fear to produce bad news in a company where good news is wanted.
Right.
If a company is focused on safety, it's got long runs of no accidents, that organization starts to change in very deep ways. It starts to suck up good news in the organization with targets and indicators. And this is where I think the biggest fear issue is the fear to tell the truth, the fear to share bad news, because most organizations can't handle the truth. If I can quote an old movie, is the ability to handle the truth. And that's, to me, is what fear is about mostly.
And Gary, how does fear manifest, and how do you know it's there within the organization?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I think there's a couple of ways that you that you know that the fear is there. And I think one of the most visible ways is that when you walk into a discussion with a group of people at the organization, and nobody talks. It's only the leader that talks, or it's somebody else that talks when the leader turns around to that person and says, "All right, Joe, you answer that question," and everybody else stands there completely tight-lipped. Other ways, I think, building on what Corey has been saying, is that fear is there when you have consistent green dashboards. There's consistent greenwashing of reports, and you either get a complete lack of reporting, or you get virtually perfect reporting all the time. Fear, I think, will also manifest itself when you when you approach people in the organization. You can see that people are not engaged; they're not prepared to go the extra mile. You look at their managers and their leaders, and you see that they are extremely hypercritical people, or they are dictatorial type managers. And I think the last way that you can see if it's manifesting itself, and besides the reporting, that is, if you look at the levels of innovation or creativity and happiness in the organization, and you can often see it on people's faces, on the way that they actually go about doing their work. If they stick purely by the rules, and they're not smiling, they're not happy, they're not engaging, you know that there's an aura of fear that exists in the organization.
Right. Thanks. Sure. So Urishni, how do you what does psychological safety mean for you?
For me, Scott, and that's really a great question, especially if we look at it in the context of what is fear. For me, psychological safety means being comfortable to be my authentic self, to be able to be empowered, to take time off, observe what is around me, feel what it is I am feeling, and if I'm not comfortable, to speak up. It is the ability to lean in and share openly, knowing that whatever I am sharing is going to be accepted with a view to improve. And I think, if we look at it in the context of De Beers, and De Beers is complex. We operate across the value chain. If we look at number of people, we've got more than 27,000 people. We have different cultures within our business, within our teams. We've got 20 countries, 30 jurisdictions. So for us, psychological safety means reaching out to our teams to ensure that they feel included, that they believe that whatever it is that they are saying is valued. And we do this through our values, where we put safety first. And we also have pioneering brilliance principles, where we encourage people to speak up, to share authentically what it is that they are feeling, and also in terms of ensuring that we accept it. We have the leadership that accepts it with curiosity. So I
Right.
think that is very important.
Yeah, that's great. And Gary, I think you kind of touched on this previously too, but what does it not mean? What?
Yeah, to me, Scott, psychological safety is not an excuse or a reason for an excuse. It's also not a shift from accountability or responsibility. As Urishni said, psychological safety allows her to be her authentic self, but that doesn't mean that one has to always be nice. That one has to always ignore the hard conversations. It also doesn't mean that you always have to be politically correct or provide rhetorical assurance all the time. And it means that you've got the freedom, that you've got the confidence to basically call a spade, to speak up and to speak out. And not just that, but that you've also got the freedom to actually listen and to listen to understand. So you don't have to be nice, but you've got that freedom.
Right. Good. And Corey, is psychological safety good for a business, and how do you know?
Yeah, so good for business. What does that mean? Good for business means, we have a great organization, everybody's happy, or business means we do well what we're here for. And it's almost like, well, what is the heart and soul of a business? What's the fundamentals of a business? And that is to achieve the highest degree of quality output of whatever your product is, and to maximize profit in the organization. And you almost say this reluctantly these days. You almost cannot talk about these things, because this whole idea of organizations the workplaces are where people live, and you can't exploit that. And that's very true. So for me, and we touched upon it both, Gary and Urishni now, it's bad for business if we created a soft environment where there's no consequences for people's actions, where everybody's completely blameless and there's no accountability. That is the danger of psychological safety, that it can pivot into that. It's about my well-being and about our well-being in the team, and how nice we are, gentle we are towards each other, so that you can speak up. And it's almost like a self-defeating kind of process in some ways. And so I'm coming from the angle, what is a high-performance environment? A high-performance environment is where you are actually stretched to your limits in your team, where the team is stretched to its limits and then beyond, because we often think I can't do more than what I do now. And then when you're really in that high-pressure situation, people produce even more, innovative. So if we drive out fear, we must not, I think, for the business perspective, we mustn't drive out enjoyment and success of achievement. We have to retain an environment where we can challenge others and be challenged by others. And it's almost like, how do we create courage? Courage in the organization where we can take risks, make mistakes, and know that the team will take responsibility for that mistake with you. Now, in safety, in quality, in the world that Deming worked in, a mistake leads to a product that's slightly defective. That's not that bad. A mistake in the safety world leads to an accident, a death, blood, if I can be dramatic about it. So this is not that easy to say, okay, we're going to create a psychological safe environment where people can make mistakes, in that environment where people can be injured. So we have to do this in a different level, I think, from an innovation. How do we create that stretch and freedom for people to innovate, to push boundaries, to experiment in their own way, but the team is there to help. The team is there to encourage. If you have a look at sporting teams when they play NFL football or soccer, or my favorite game, rugby. This doesn't happen in hockey, Scott. They don't know anything about this yet. But if you have a look at how they make mistakes on a rugby field, on a person who kicks the ball in the wrong direction or whatever, the others would come to him or her and they would support that person, and they would, don't worry about this, we'll make this better. But they also get pushed to perform harder and better. So it's a very complex thing. It's not that simple. I think that psychological safety is in safety a simple equation.
Right, and it could mean different things to different people. So very individual kind of in its delivery.
Yeah.
So the next one is and this is kind of the dichotomy a little bit from psychological safety, meeting your safety targets, and I've been part of a safety committee where the in the mining industry, where the contractors and subcontractors say, they feel free in that committee environment to say, hey, whatever number you set for us, owner, those are the numbers we're gonna reach magically, right? So what are, it's obviously not necessarily working towards the driving fear out or the psychological safety that we're talking about, but what's the impact of putting in safety targets within an organization?
Yeah, great question. And I really want to pick up on what Corey was saying in terms of teams. Corey, 100%. We need to have team targets, and that's exactly what Gary and I have. We're a team, we don't have individual targets, so we support each other so that we achieve together, whatever that achievement looks like. If we start to look at safety targets within the diamond industry, which is where we are, we need to ensure that our consumers' desire for our diamonds is maintained. And with that comes expectations around safety performance. And our consumers are expecting flawless safety as they do with flawless diamonds. So we need to ensure that we co-create what does this targets look like for flawless safety. And we spark fresh thinking. So it's not only your lagging metrics. So we're not only looking at injuries. Yes, injuries are important. Our consumers do not want to see fatalities linked to our diamonds. So everything that we do, we focus on eliminating high risk, high consequence injuries. So that's a non-negotiable. We eliminate fatalities. We have 0 fatalities. We then look at high consequences incident, HPIs. We reduce repeats on HPIs, and we bring those HPI numbers down. Focusing on the leading metrics, we look at encouraging our people to feel psychologically safe to report hazards. And we do this by monitoring the HPH, high potential hazard reports. We look at the learnings that are coming from there, and we systemically come up with action plans. We then look at the closeout rate of those actions. So we say you need to have 0 outstanding consequence for related actions. And we monitor this as part of our operational transformation meetings. We look at VFLs. Are our leaders making time to move away from their desks and engage with teams in emotional connections, as well as looking at workplace risks as part of visible thought leadership? We then look at our supervisors. Are our supervisors engaging meaningful toolbox talk with their teams? What actions are coming from those toolbox talks? And we monitor, we trend, we use data analytics, and we feed back into the teams. So I think, yes, in terms of safety targets, they do have a place. 100% agree that they cannot only be lagging metrics, because we don't want a culture of non-reporting. We want to stretch our teams, make sure that they are regularly on the sites, hunting and reporting on those HPHs.
Right, great.
Scott, if I can maybe just make a comment there. One of the safety targets that I really have a battle with, and I'm so pleased that we don't have that kind of target within our organization, but you find quite a few organizations that work in high risk industries have targets, or they have budgets for lost time injuries. They have budgets for medical treatment cases. Yeah, like right this year, we will budget to have 5 lost time injuries. Yeah, my response to that is, right, well, how will you choose those 5 people that are going to get injured? You know, you can't set targets for things like that. That's why the focus needs to move from lagging to leading.
Right.
And I think, you know, as well as with that psychological safety, Scott, it's a journey.
Right.
So, I mean, if we look at De Beers, in a very short space of time, we had 5 LTIs. And the first thing that we said is, let's be calm. Let's understand what are the learnings. Listen to understand. We called the leaders call, and our leader, Bruce Cleaver, chaired the call. We asked the GM that's responsible for the site to present the learnings. And we had teams, not only within De Beers, but outside of De Beers as well, putting up their hand and says, actually, we had similar incidents. And this is not relating to people not understanding the task. These are low incidence tasks. Let's start to understand what is really on our people's minds, what is weighing them down mentally. And then let's start to look at what we refer to as the employee assistance program calls and start to track and trend them so that we can understand where are our people's emotional health at. And we find COVID, for example, you know, families' loss of jobs, family being ill, etc. All of that is weighing people down. We then come up with, let's connect these people to help. And then we find that based on that, we will find a change in terms of our safety performance. So that link to mental health, physical health is key on this journey.
Right, right. And that, Corey, that leads into, you know, what is the impact of the team on and on others in these behaviors?
Yeah. You know, I met with a mine manager, called a mine overseer, and I sat down with him and I asked him, how often do you get to your team on the ground now? There's a coal mine. And his answer shocked me. And he said, as little as possible. And I thought to myself, well, this is not a great example of leadership. But when he started to explain it, I thought this is a great example of leadership. When he said, my obligation as a leader to develop my team in such a way that they actually don't need me. They only would need me to pass things to senior management. They only need me to do some authorization on things that they can't. But other than that, they function very effectively on their own. And the more I leave them alone, the better that happens. And this comes to, you know, what is the structure of the organization and what is the structure of the team? And for me, it is when safety or the philosophy that you pursue becomes really part of your business DNA. And there's a great example of an organization that has integrated safety with their DNA, and that is actually De Beers. Just look at their moniker, pioneering brilliant safety. And pioneering is they break new ground. They are going to go into world-class safety where others have maybe not been, but they're going to pioneer because that's part of how the De Beers company has been founded. Pioneers. And then brilliant is their diamonds. This is why we buy diamonds, is because of the brilliance of it. Now they make that the same as their safety. To me, that brings a team together as an organization as a whole. The more they understand this is what we're about in this team, in this organization, and we will be great together. That's an enormously powerful impact of of that on the team's behaviors, and it comes from the team within.
Yeah, great. And drilling into that a little bit, Gary, what's the impact of the supervisor?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I think Corey partly answered that, and I think one needs to look at the supervisor here, not just as the guy that not manages but leads the frontline team. One can also see it as the context of the CEO leading his exco team. He's still acting as a supervisor of that group of people, and likewise all the way through the leadership and the management chain. But really the supervisor is, to my mind, that key person that can either make or break that team. He's the person that team engages with the most. He or she is the person that that really leads those safe practices that the team needs to follow. He motivates and he creates the environment and the space that people can perform using safe behaviors, and that people can feel free to basically speak up. And really, he or she is the person that creates the environment for that team to either succeed or to fail.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And Corey, what's the impact of management and the company on the overall psychological safety?
Well, that starts from the top of the organization. That starts to what happens in the board room of the organization. What do they want to know about safety? If they're interested in the charts of lost time injuries that are going the right direction, then that sends a message in the organization. And I know that many, if not most, boards of companies today are still looking at charts of lost time injuries. And that sends a message. What do we want? We want a good looking chart, a looking good index, the LGI. And then that is destructive. So the second thing is, how is safety defined in the organization? And again, that's defined at the top of the organization, inside the top of the leadership of the organization. What is safety? When we say the company must be safe, what do we mean? And immediately we want the absence of accidents. And that's the typical traditional way. And then after that, why do we have accidents? Well, it's very clear that people have made mistakes. And they can pinpoint the mistakes, and it can be analyzed, and there's all kinds of human factors that come into play, and beautiful reports go up, and it's human error. This issue of human error, even though it's almost, the new view of safety says we can't talk about human error, it's still what is being talked about in a company. You can't escape it. And partly because it's what happened in behavioral safety. For decades now, the behavioral safety school of thinking had trained organizations to look at the actions of people in the workplace and ask questions. Why do they make these poor choices? Why do they lack awareness? Why don't they know they're within the line of fire? And we give them line of fire training or line of fire awareness. These are the kind of reactive issues that come into play if an accident happens. If I had a nickel for every time I heard this question, an accident happened, and the first question is being asked is, did this person have personal issues? Was there something at home that distracted them? They didn't have their mind on the job, and that's why they had an accident? Now, just think about the logic of that. How many times do you actually have your mind on the job? How many times can you say, I focused you drive your car and you go from A to B. You don't even remember what you've seen or whatever you've done. You cannot have your mind on the job. So 100% of the time. So that's not the solution. But the moment we ask that question, we define safety. We define the way that we're going to react to it. And that is a very destructive one. We can turn it around. We can turn it around. And again, if I could come back to the beers, they have a moniker that says humans are the strongest link in our safety chain. Not the weakest, not the one who makes poor choices, but humans are the strongest link. If we support them, they are leaders at the front end. They will take action, they will report things, they will make things right in their environment. It's a mindset that is sitting in the management of a company that drives everything down. And no matter how much we try to put new posters out to say, no, we don't do this, with just culture and fairness and so on, it's what's being asked at the front end by the supervisor. Why did you do this? Why did you make this mistake? So the organization, right from the board, has an enormous impact on the way we define things. And we can define it in a constructive or a destructive way.
Right. Krishni, did you want to add anything to that? I saw you.
Absolutely. I mean, as Corey said, certainly in terms of safety or safe organization is not the absence of incidents, 100%. And we talk about the presence of competence. And you know, as Corey's very much alluded to, it is the ability of our teams to be ready to respond. And that's really what pulls everything together. So I think for us, that is key. Just understanding where we are in terms of what we refer to as our 4 C's, one of which is the competence piece.
Great. Great. And so Gary, kind of tying into that, isn't the freedom to fail exactly what you shouldn't allow for safety to flourish?
Yeah, Scott, if I can just make a further comment before I answer that.
Yeah.
Building on yeah, no, look, that's fine. Just building on from what Corey was mentioning about Monica being humans are the strongest link, or we are the strongest link. Where we are in evolving that to is we are keeping the humans are the strongest link components of the moniker, but realizing that we need to drive out fear and we need to bring in that feeling and that knowledge that I'm safe to be the strongest link. What we are now evolving to is always safe being the strongest link. You know, so that people know that they can do what needs to be done in order to be safe and at least feel psychologically safe doing that. But to come back to your question in terms of in terms of failing that, I think one certainly wants to encourage risk taking, and and I think people that are watching this are going to probably have a bit of a shock, but I think I'd like to just qualify that and say you don't want to encourage reckless risk taking. Yeah, and I think we need to see failure as a learning opportunity. And I was once told by one of my mentors, and I can't remember where it comes from, is that if you fail once, it's a learning opportunity. If you fail twice, then you have made a mistake. And I think we need to allow the people that and the freedom to be innovative, but they need to do it not in a reckless way, but in a calculated and a considered way. And I think if we look at the way that most organizations run their approach to safety at the moment, it's an extremely regulated environment that doesn't really allow people to be proactive or and to be innovative, and it really just drives compliance and a reactive approach, as opposed to driving out that fear, so that and that people can be innovative and can find better ways of actually doing it. Because we've seen, with part of what we've implemented with the Safe Sentry is our frontline people know a tremendous amount about what they do, and we as managers or leaders or engineers that design systems don't know everything, and these people, when you give them the opportunity, absolutely amazing what they actually find and they come back with.
Right.
And if we were driving out that if we were driving that fear that you can't report this, you can't report that, we would never find those, and we would never find those gems that when you look at it can actually kill people. So we're now creating the environment where you can actually do that without that fear.
Yeah, and that's a great example. And Corey, we'll probably have to have a separate discussion around Safe Century, but it is, you mentioned professional sports teams, and obviously their games are all on tape, so they go back and they review those mistakes and correct them in the future. And I think in the workplace, it's hard to record everything that's happening in a large facility like De Beers mining facility, but that Safe Century approach gives you an opportunity to kind of have eyes in the field and eyes on the ground, and know where those mistakes or potential mistakes are occurring. But yeah, great point.
Hey, pardon the interruption. Great conversation, really a great deep dive. Really taking a good look at how to drive out fear in an organization, but from a very practical level. We'll cut this into 2 parts. So this will be the end of part 1, and you can click somewhere up here for part 2, and really appreciate you sticking around. And yeah, part 2 takes an even deeper dive with some great examples right from the field. So enjoy part 2, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks a lot.